Welcome to episode 2 of Rod's Guitar Workshop. Today's topic, I thought it would be cool to kind of talk about chords. So I get a lot of questions from students who want to know about how do you know what chord to use? Or I know some chords, but I don't feel like I know enough. Or how do I make this chord thing work? What's a capo? So I thought I'd do a real quick video and just talk about basically when you use certain chords. So we would hope that you all probably know, to really get something out of this, you'll need to know your basic chords down here. Okay, cowboy chords, if that's what you want to call them. I like everybody to know C, D, E, F, G, A, and then minor chords, A minor, D minor, E minor, and then the 7 chords, C7, D7, E7, F7, G7, and A7, and B7, okay? And then I'd like everyone to know 2 forms for all the bar chords. So form 1 has its root note on the E string, and we would have major, minor, and 7, and these are all movable. Okay? If I move it down to form 2, major, minor, and then 7. Okay? So that will give you 3 forms for every single chord. So if you notice when we talked about the ones down in the open position, that we had some holes in there because the fingers are goofy down there. So the bar chords gives you a major, minor, and a 7 for every one of those. Now, right there people say, well, how do I know? Do I play everything with bar chords or do I use the open chords? A lot of it's going to depend on sound. Okay, so I love the sound of open chords. Okay, bar chords have a great sound, especially if you're playing with a bunch of fuzz. Okay, that kind of thing. Or do you want a very percussive kind of sound? All right, the bar chords would be what I would go for. It's very difficult to mute an open chord because you have open strings ringing. I can do it. But it's way easier to go and just kind of bounce that chord into that rhythm for that. So just between those 2 usage, is how I determine which one of those 2 chords I would like to choose from. Now, I try and use open chords a lot because I like the way they ring. Okay, I think they sound cool and it's a really neat sound. But sometimes you have to use a bar chord because we have some holes where we don't necessarily have an easily voiced open position chord. So I can play these chords, a C sharp minor. You're going to be kind of locked into a bar chord shape for them. Well, how do I know whether to use the form 2 bar chord or the form 1 bar chord? Technically they're the same, right? But the sound is slightly different because you have different string gauges and they're played at a different spot on the neck. They're going to sound slightly different. So depending on what your ear is hearing for the chord, you can determine which one of those you want to use. The other thing that will determine it is placement. If you were in a key where it's easier to play a bar chord, so if I was going, okay, instead of going and jumping around on these chords, I can play it very easily with a bar chord. So if I'm here, this A is going to be quicker and closer than this one. So I'm lazy. I want to find the easiest way to play everything. So that's how I'm going to lay that stuff out. Find the next closest chord that you have. And that in itself covers a lot of ground, okay? Now, say for example, you're playing in a church group, you're playing with buddies on the weekend, or maybe you have a bar band, you go out and play in the bars on the weekend or the clubs, and you have another instrument in the band that's playing in the same frequencies, okay? So one example of that would be if you had a second guitar player. So maybe there's 2 guitar players in your band. Maybe you have a keyboard player. Or even worse, maybe you have a keyboard player and 2 guitar players. Okay, and when I say even worse, all of those instruments are fighting for the same frequencies. So you really have to come up with different ways of playing these chords to make it sound pleasing. There's something interesting that happens if we're both playing together and we're both banging this G chord out. Right? One of us is going to go away to the listener. you're only really going to hear one of them. And the one your ear is typically drawn to is the one that sounds the worst. Maybe it's slightly out of tune, you know, or maybe it's the rhythm's a little off. If you think about it, if you had a choir of 30 people, 29 of them are singing beautifully, and one person lets out, "New," sounds horrible. That's all they hear. Everything, all their 29 are negated because of that one that sounded bad. So that same thing happens when we're all playing the same thing. Keyboards take up a ton of space, so we really have to play less and be very careful what we play when we're playing with a keyboard player. But one way to do that is play a different voicing. So all of these different shapes are different voicings. So if your guy in your band's banging this G chord out, you know, you wouldn't want to be doing the same thing. Play a different voicing, okay? So I could come up here and play the form 2 voicing right here. You know, or maybe just do a steady. Or I could even just put a single note line in it. So I don't have to be playing the full thing all the time, especially if someone else is already doing that. That really is a luxury to have if you're lucky enough to play in those situations, because you can you have lots of room to do something different or interesting and come up with your own parts. Ideally, what you want it to sound like to the listener who's out front, you want it to kind of sound stereo. You want them to hear both of those parts as they're listening to the music. You want to hear them have your part in that one. You don't want to have anything drowned out. So that's a really important aspect of it. The third way we deal with chords is capos. People call these cheaters and stuff. Whatever. You can play all bar chords if you want. This is an amazing tool, and this is something I recommend everyone get, especially if you're kind of relatively new or never had one of these before. They're relatively cheap, less than $20 probably, and they really open up the guitar. So, say for example you really like those open ringy chords like I do. Well, I can put a capo on there, and basically what it does is it makes it so I can play all of my open chords. Okay, anywhere on the neck just by moving this around. So I can play that G, C, and D. Okay, anywhere I want to hit it, I can move it around. Now this does a couple things. So one, it lets me have the big open ringy sound. Say for example I want to have something different. In our example that we had a G chord that your bandmate was playing. I could put the capo at the 7th fret and play a C. That's now a G chord. So I could go. Revoice all of these chords with a capo on, and now you have a totally different sound, a really cool way to shift it. If you see large bands will use country music, pop country music. If you see bands doing that, typically you'll see a lot of people with capos in different spots playing different voicings because they're creating that big wall of sound. So capos can be a blast. The other thing that capo is great for is if you want to try and sing. A lot of people go, I don't sing, I can't hit any of the pitches. Typically it's because people are trying to sing the songs in the same key as the original artist. So one of the tricks I learned over the years is if you can't hit the notes, put a capo on and play the same thing. So if I was going, very simply, if I was doing this, and I'm trying to sing there and it's not working, move it up and see if it makes it easier for you to hit the pitches. Okay, so by moving it around, I can get that into a key that I can sing in. If you're just starting out singing, typically guys, you'll find 1 or 2 keys that you can hit the notes in, and then just put everything in those keys for a bit, till you develop that vocal muscle and you can sing in 3 or 4 keys, and then it's a muscle, so as you develop strength you'll be able to sing in the various different keys. So chords can be really cool. We're going to come back in another one of these lessons and talk about some rhythm ideas with these chords, but for right now it's really great just to kind of wrap your head around it if you weren't totally comfortable with the concept of how all these chords relate to one another and which one should I use and what one should I know. And again, I kind of rattled off the chords that I think you should know. If you don't know those, go learn them right now. They're all over the internet. Like I said in the first video, I'm not going to get into the minutiae of the stuff that there's just tons of material available for you. You can learn all those chords off the internet. But make sure you learn them and make sure you know the names. One of the big problems I see with people coming in who are self-taught, either doing YouTube videos or whatever. They can play a song note for note or something, but they don't know what a C chord is. So make sure you learn the names of the things that you have in front of you. One, so you can communicate with other musicians. And also when you see C, you know what to play on the guitar. Hopefully many different voicings, as we just talked about. As we just talked about, you'd have half a dozen different ways to play C if we include the capo. So if you dig these videos, hopefully you're getting something out of them. Please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button and the like button on there. And as always, if there's a topic you'd like to see covered on here, send me a message or post it in the comments and I'll check it out. And if it's something that fits in here, I will try and get an answer for you. Thanks again for hanging out. Have a great day.